So we're going to dive into step 9. It says this. Step 9 is we made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. The scripture that goes with that, because we are a Christ-centered 12 steps, so we have biblical comparisons to go with each step. It's found in Matthew 5:23 through 24. It says, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. So last month, if you missed, we talked about step 8, which is making a list. And that's all it is. It's not rocket science, but it is the first time where you're going from steps 1 through 7, where it's an inward focus on you, your recovery, to going outward for your recovery. So you're focusing on other people at this point. So you've made your list. Now you're willing to go and talk to the people on that list. And so for me, I was super excited to get to step 9. Not because it was step 9, and I'm like, ooh, 3 more and I'm done. No. This is a continuous thing. You can always do the 12 steps. It doesn't matter what hurt, habit, or hang-up that you've got. I tell people all the time, it's great for life application, period, right? But I was super excited to get to this step because that means I was taking my next step in my recovery journey, that I was able to go to the people and start making amends. And to make an amend is to change. It's not, hey, I'm sorry I stole $100 from you. I'm sorry that I stole $200 from you. I'm sorry that I slept with your husband. I'm sorry that, I conned you into doing something that you didn't want to do. It's not that, right? So many times we go to the people that we hurt, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I'm sorry. By the time we actually get to our recovery and into step 9, they don't want to hear I'm sorry. They're as sick and tired of being sick and tired of hearing I'm sorry as you are of hearing it, right? So when you're making an amends, you're making a change. And so that's not going to happen overnight. So the people that you talk to, this is what you're kind of talking to them about. Like you're committing to making a change, and it's going to take time for them to see that. So when I got to this, in no particular order, I started with my parents, because that was going to be a good, easy segue into step 9 for me. My parents loved me. They came and got me out of jail. They didn't put me in jail when they could have countless times. And people ask me all the time, had they left you in jail, had they sent you to jail, had they kicked you out of your house, where would you have ended up? I have no idea. I really don't, right? Because I was never faced with that situation. I don't know if I would dive deeper into my addiction and have been homeless and been on the street and in jail multiple times, or if I would have started acting better and been like, man, I've got to make this change so I'm not homeless, right? I just don't know. So I went and talked to them, and it was an easy conversation. They saw the change in me before I even went to rehab, because I went to them and said, hey, like, I'm ready to go. Like, I need to go to rehab. Like, I know I need to go. The only thing I ask you to do is don't send me to a local rehab. Because in my head, I figured I could either get out of there easily and walk to someone's house. I don't think I would have stayed. Or people would have came to me. Now, I don't know if any of that's factual or not, but in my head, because I'm a great deceiver in my head, this is what I was telling myself. And so they already started seeing a change, and especially when I came back. Like, my mom knew I was going to be okay when I was in rehab, not because I was in rehab, but when I was talking to her on my birthday in rehab, I said, hey, when you send me, I think it was cookies, no-bake cookies. When you send me those, will you also send me my Bible? And that was the first time in probably 10 plus years that I had touched the Bible, wanted to read a Bible, like wanted to dive into God's word. And she said from that point on, she was like, I knew you were going to be okay. My dad was a different story. My dad's a little bit more of a worrywart than my mom. And so it took a good 6+ months for my dad to be like, oh, no, I think he's going to be okay. Like, they came with me the first 6 months here every Monday. Like, they would walk me in, and then they would leave as I'm going to group. And they even told me, this is a couple years later, but they told me, yeah, we waited out of the car for at least 15 minutes to make sure that you weren't coming back out. Rightfully so. I had done a lot of harm. So they saw that change that I wanted to make. My next one was a little harder, but still close. It was my brother. And so if you have a brother and you are a male, then you know that you kind of have conversations with your sibling without having conversations with your sibling. And so it's kind of that moment where we were at a family event, and we were sitting next to each other, and I just looked over at him. I took a deep breath, and I was going to talk to him about it, and he just kind of gave me that nod like, it's okay. It's okay. And I knew from that moment on, like, we were good. Like, we've never been great. We are night and day. I mean, physical, mental, everything. I mean, he's 6'1", straight blonde hair, blue eyes, skinny as a rail of a person. I am not that. You boys got a fro, hazel eyes, and he likes to eat, okay? That's just not who we are. So we've always been different our entire life, but at that moment, we were good. And so now, for back then, that was the time I knew, like, if mom and dad had passed before that moment, I don't know if me and my brother would have had a relationship. But from that moment on, I know no matter what, if mom and dad pass, we'll at least see each other a few times a year, right? Because we have that bond now. The next one was hard. This one, she was like family. She was one of my mom's cheerleaders. Her and my brother were like siblings. I mean, they looked more alike than me and my brother did. We dated off and on, early 20s. I messed up probably at least 3 times with her in different forms and fashions throughout my addiction. It took me a couple weeks to muster up the courage to text her, to set up a time to meet and have coffee and share my story with her. And so that's an important part of this step. You don't just randomly walk up to someone and say, hey, I want to make an amends to you. I want to talk about it. 9 times out of 10, it's just not going to work that way. Like, you got to set up a time for them to hear your story. So don't make it random, make it personable. So that's what I was going to do. So I texted her, hey, I know I've wronged you so many times, so you probably want nothing to do with me. And rightfully so. But if you would, I'm not asking for another chance, but I'm asking for a conversation to tell you my story. What felt like a couple hours was actually just a couple minutes. And I got the text back, I don't want to hear from you again. I don't want to see you. That was hard. That was a conversation with my sponsor. And you're gonna come to those. And so when you do this step and you get to that point and you get to a person that says, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want to see you. Or maybe they've passed and you can't make amends to them. Write a letter. So that's what I did. I wrote a letter. Wrote a letter to her. I continue to pray, hey, God, if we can meet, would you intervene that? Would you make that happen? I wish I could tell you that it has, and I've been able to make that amends, but here I am 8 years later, and I've not been able to physically, personally make that amends. And so though it still weighs on me a little bit, I dropped a lot of that baggage when I was able to write that letter. And after I wrote that letter, I burned it. I cannot tell you the amount of freedom I got from burning that letter. It's like it never existed. Now, I'm sure if I'm able to see her face to face, that some of the old feelings would come back up because they've not been resolved personally on one-on-one. But I've done everything I can on my side of the street to get to that point, right? So one of my favorite stories about making amends and making a change is Jacob and Esau. And it's funny that you always hear Jacob's name first, even though he's the second born. Usually when you talk about siblings, you always talk about the firstborn and then the secondborn, but not in this case. The reason being, Jacob conned Esau out of his birthright. Granted, I'm a firm believer in choice. Esau made his choice. He's like, I can keep it and not eat, or give it and eat. He made a choice. He gave it and ate. Because Esau was this man's man. He was a hunter. He was a provider, like just a big old boy, right? He could have went out easily and got some rabbit or deer, donkey, whatever they were eating back then. But he chose in that moment to give up his birthright, regardless. Now, the second time Jacob got him, Isaac, his dad, couldn't see. So he called in his oldest, Esau, said, hey, go catch something for me, make it, and then I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give you a blessing. So Esau goes out. He's going to go hunt. Jacob and his mom overheard and said, hey, let's trick your dad into thinking you're Esau, and you're going to get the blessing that Esau was going to get. Jacob was like, sure, why not? So they did. If I'm Esau, I'm upset, right? I'm beyond upset. Like, I'm going to kill Jacob. I'm going to kill Jacob. You took my birthright, and then you took my blessing. Like, I'm not okay with that. So what does Jacob do? He does what any great person does when they think they're in trouble and going to die. You run. Anybody else run from? Yeah. Ran from obligations, ran from adversity, yeah. So that's what Jacob does. He stays gone for quite a bit of time. God blesses him. He gets married to a couple of women, has 12 kids. At one point, he's like, I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to go to the lands of my people. So he's going. He sends waves and waves of donkeys and sheep and cattle and all kinds of stuff and servants like ahead of him. One, he knew at some point somebody, if they got attacked, somebody would run back to him and say, hey, your bro's still upset, like go the other way. So he sends waves and waves, nothing. He finally gets to this moment with his brother Esau, and he sees him, and he bows before him like, hey, like I messed up. I hope the gifts are enough. I hope the servants are appealing to you. And what's Esau do? He says, none of that matters. I'm just glad you're home. And gives him a hug. That's the way to make amends. It's not the gifts that you bring, but it's the change that they can see in you, right? Another story where a brother couldn't see the change in another brother is the prodigal son. Prodigal son comes back, father's arms wide open. The brother says, what's going on? Oh, we're killing the fattest calf, and your brother's back. We're super excited. He's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Like he squandered everything, and we're just gonna welcome him back. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what family does. It's just what family does. That's what we do here at Celebrate. It doesn't matter, you go back out and you come back, like, we're going to love on you. If you feel judgment or shame or guilt, I can tell you that's not from us. That's the enemy whispering to you saying, hey, they don't think you're good enough. They don't think you're worthy enough. Because we do love you. We are excited that you've come back. We are excited that you're trying to get help. We are excited that you're here because you're making a small change. And those small changes become big changes. I say it all the time. Small changes become big changes. One small change that I've started making in my family's life that I absolutely love is every morning before we go to school, the boys, and we've only done it 2 weeks, so don't think, oh, he's been doing this forever. No, I just started this like 2 weeks ago. Okay, brand new thing, small change. But already my boys are coming in the morning after they get ready for school. Hey, are we going to do the thing? I'm like, yeah, let's armor up. So, yeah. So we watch a 4-minute video, and it talks about the armor of God. And so every morning before they step out those doors, they already know, hey, we're getting armored up. We're getting ready for battle. Because they're going to a public school. What if I could afford a private school, they would go to a private school. But I can't. I got 5 kids. So they go to a public school. But I love them being in a public school because they can be the light that a kid needs. They can show other kids how to make amends to other kids when they've wronged them. I don't know how many times my middle son, during the course of our conversations, I try to play basketball, but they just won't pass me the ball. I personally cannot relate to that, okay? I was very athletic as a child. Not saying he's not. I've not seen him play, but if you guys know my middle son, you guys know athleticism is probably just not in his genes. Now, the boy can tinker and build, and he's creative like nobody's business. Like he sees something in a whole different light than I ever could imagine. Like if he's not an engineer, I'm be surprised. He's still going to be making bank as an engineer, but NBA is not in his future. Okay? But he can teach other kids, hey, even though you don't pass me the ball, like I still love you. Even though you don't want to include me, I still love you. It's okay that I'm not included in that. I still love you. And so, if you find yourself questioning, like, do I really need to go make amends to that person? Then you probably need to go make amends to that person. And yes, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be some people on that list that you just don't want to make amends to because you're like, well, they wronged me first. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But keep in mind what the step says towards the end. It says, except when to do so would injure them or others. So don't go make amends to someone when you know good and well that your intentions are not pure going to make amends with those people because your intention is to get them in trouble. That's not making amends. That's going to stir up stuff. And that's not who you are. You're a new person. You're a new creation. And so keep that in mind too. When you go to these people and they reject you, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the old you. They're not rejecting the new you because they don't know who that is. And that's okay. They don't have to know who the new you are. I know who I am. I love me some me. And if you don't love you some you, then it's going to be hard for other people to love you too. It starts with you. It starts with you. I want to leave you with this. We could be a ripple a ripple effect that will go beyond what we can ever imagine. Only if we show love. Paul talks about this in the book of Corinthians. You could do everything. You could do everything. You could speak as beautiful as anybody. You could play instruments better than anybody, whatever it is. But if you do all this and you don't love, it means nothing. It means nothing. It's so important to go make the amends in a loving way and be okay with that rejection. Because they're rejecting the BCU.